Anyway, I'm Orv W6BI, AREDN ambassador. And for those who may not know, um, the previous project manager from AREDN had to retire out of the organization due to medical issues. And by virtue of me being the only one who didn't step back a pace, I'm now the project manager too. Of course, that doesn't mean much when you're managing volunteers, mostly a cheerleader anyway. On to the next one. Anyway, amateur radio emergency data network, but like other ham communications, we only use it for emergencies when we need to and use it for routine stuff all the other times. Anyway, uses off-the-shelf wireless hardware. In the bad old days, we had to hack on Lynx's WRT54Gs, and that was bad, but that's long gone. And you load them with AREDN software. And it creates an IP network. It goes out and finds other network nodes, figures out the routes, does discovery and all that. So that makes it a little easy to, I wouldn't say it's simple to configure, but it doesn't require a lot of network knowledge. And it has pretty good range. If you've got line of sight and reasonably modern equipment on each end, you can do 20 miles easily with, I don't know, 3 to 5 megabits per second. Okay, this is an eye chart. This is the new UI, user interface. Tom's familiar with it, and maybe some of the others. This was incorporated in October. Doesn't change the performance much, but there was a ton of information available within the software that wasn't accessible by the admin. Now it is, and you can better figure out what the node's doing, if it has issues, and fine-tune it. So anyway, call them nodes after the software's loaded. They're low power, typically 600 milliwatts. And it, like I said, it's line of sight, no trees allowed, and there's no knife edge refraction like you might see in VHF or UHF. So usually communicate through a Hilltop radio site. With VHF FM, it would be a repeater. Through AREDN, it's another node on the Hilltop. Same software. And if your node hears multiple nodes, it will always choose the best route due to the routing algorithm. It evaluates the routes and chooses the best one. So we kind of discourage omnidirectional antennas because, well, why broadcast all your energy in one direction when you're only going to talk in one direction? Plus, it helps minimize the hidden terminal problem we are so familiar with packet radio. So you've got all these neat nodes out there. They make a network, but it doesn't do anything. It's all about the services, the things you can get to. Keyboard to keyboard, voice, video, email, messaging, document editing, management, file sharing, web servers, repeater linking, games, and pretty much anything else you can think of subject to the Part 97 regulations. I'm going to show some examples of apps that have been used. We've used all of these in Southern California. We're not currently using all of them. Some of them we evaluated and said, yeah, that's cool. And there are applications being used in other parts of the country that we don't use. So this is just a sample. Collaboration servers. These are like you see the gamers use to communicate with other members of their teams, the movies or TV. TeamSpeak, Mumble, Teamtalk. If you go to Wikipedia and ask about collaboration servers, there's a list of at least 24 of them. And they all have pretty similar features: voice and video chat, file sharing, desktop sharing. I'm sure there are others. They all can use a speaker, microphone, or a headset, which obviously would give you better audio. We chose Teamtalk because it's one of the few that doesn't force you to encrypt. So we got to avoid that whole discussion, and it works fine. This is not your father's FM repeater. It is full duplex, which means you can interrupt a guy on the other end who's going on and on and on. You don't have to wait till he times out the repeater. And because there are multiple channels uh, available, you can go off and talk to somebody else. I'll talk about that. And this is not, again, communications grade audio, 300 to 3000 hertz. The codecs in the phones or headset, the codecs on either end will shift up to the highest quality possible. And typically it's quite good. We have a weekly net here on the Teamtalk server, a voice net, and I'll close the doors to the office, put a headset on, sometimes put it into Vox and put my feet up, and the all quality's just excellent. It sometimes it's like the guy you're talking to is in the same room. This is the Teamtalk user interface, shows you who's on. When a person is talking, or at least when they're pushed to talk, the background of their call turns green. When they finish talking, it turns yellow. So you can see KM6FQ Dave was the last one to talk. And I took this screenshot, asked a few people to turn on their cameras. We don't find the video adds a lot to a voice net, but I did this in case. I do it periodically to stress the network. With these up here, I went up and looked at the server, which was a Raspberry Pi 2 or 3 at the time, and it was 10% CPU utilization and 10% network utilization. And the network video streams are, in this case, about 100 kilobits per second. If you're worried about VoIP, it's about 30 kilobits per second. So the any network worth its salt, any AREDN network worth its salt can carry this data easily. If you've ever been on Slack, it's a voice and or text and pictures type thing. Mattermost and Rocket Chat are two open source Slack wannabes, and they support multiple channels. All of them have a web access or applications for any of the popular OSs. This was a while ago. This is our Mattermost server on the mesh network. Eric, KG6WXC, and his wife and daughter were out in the high desert of Southern California camping when the 7.1 earthquake hit Ridgecrest. They were about 20 miles away, and they got bounced around pretty good, but they were in a tent out on the flat, so no harm, no damage, no injuries. The next day, Eric drove over and looked at the surface rupture. He took a photo and he shared it. Now, back then and still now, we don't have any mesh network up in the high desert, but there is wireless. Eric has two Teamtalk servers, one on the internet and one on the mesh network, and he tied them together. So he took this picture with his cell phone, shared it on the Mattermost app on his phone, and it showed up on the mesh network. So it was pretty slick. You can also do voice over IP phones. There's a Grandstream phone. If you can see it, it says you missed one call. And if it was video, you could see the red light in the corner flashing, indicating I had one call. We use Grandstream phones locally because we have a Grandstream PBX. It's right there. It's since been moved, but this is where it was in a repeater rack on, where was this? Sulphur Mountain, south of Ojai, California. We bought one rather than try and homebrew one because the network administrator was not real good with Linux. He's doing better, but I wouldn't have wanted to push asterisk on him or free PBX or anything like that. So we purchased that, and it's under $300. I don't know, it's 64 simultaneous conversations or something silly like that. We have about 30 extensions configured where we can push the mesh network out to served agencies. We will give them a VoIP phone and a VoIP extension. and also a Teamtalk account on a PC. So it works pretty well. The other thing that's a big deal in Southern California is cameras, and I'll talk about why. This is a fixed camera. Um, the town in the foreground there is Los Osos. In the background, you can see Morro Bay and Morro Rock on the coast. This is a PTZ in my hometown of Simi Valley. It patrols, um, and about every 5 minutes, I have a script that pulls a screenshot down, and I post them on a web page on the mesh, and then I mirror it out to my cloud server so everybody can see it. So you can see that it covers quite a bit of area. That same site, when we upgraded from a fixed focus camera to a PTZ camera, we just left the fixed focus camera in place and pointed it down at the building where our gear is and called it a security camera. This is what started it all. Back in 2017, Paul WD6EBY and I were pushing out a backbone, AREDN backbone across Ventura County, and we put a node up on Sulphur Mountain, which is south of Ojai, California. And he had a junker camera and he put up there. Well, not too long after that, the Thomas Fire broke out near Santa Paula, California. The webcam, the camera happened to be pointing at where it was coming from. And I was able to stream that video down from the webcam across the mesh network and back up to YouTube. And a number of people watched it for a while. We lost power less than 2 hours later because one of the intermediate mesh nodes lost Edison power. And at that point in time, we didn't have any backup power. So lessons learned. We spent the rest, from then on, we made sure that we had backup power at every site, at least batteries. Some of them have solar, and that's a work in progress. And started pushing out PTZ cameras where we could. And sure enough, less than a year later, the Woolsey fire, which broke out on another hot, windy Santa Ana winds day. It broke out in Woolsey Canyon, which is about 3 screens to the left, right on the border between LA and Ventura County. Wind was howling, humidity down to 10%. And it only took just a few hours to get across here. This particular site is on the north edge of my valley, Simi Valley. It's looking southwest. And this is a PTZ camera that we had just put in. That fire made a run down the hill towards the city. The fire department fought it off. The wind turned. It went back over the hill, back down to Malibu. Actually went through Thousand Oaks, burned lots of structures, went up and over the Santa Monica Mountains, down to Malibu, and stopped at the Pacific Ocean. We streamed this one for about 36 hours. And Ben, AI6YR, a local ham, has a large following because he's very up on emergency communications. In fact, he's a contributor to the Watch Duty app, if you're familiar with that. In any case, I sent the URL, the YouTube URL to him, and over the next a day and a half, we had hundreds of people check in and watch it, and they told us they found it useful. We haven't had any major fires since then. This one was a few years ago. And it's right down at the bottom of the hill where the camera happened to be. If you're familiar with Southern California, this is the Santa Susana Pass, the 118 freeway. Obviously, somebody threw out a cigarette or something. If you look in the center down low, you can see members of the strike team that a previous helicopter dropped off. So that was interesting to watch. So the future of EmComm is not voice, but rather data. Anybody's ever transmitted a handwritten, single-spaced, full page of medical supplies over voice, you know it's slow and error-prone. would be easier to transmit a text file. Somebody'd hand it to you on a thumb drive. And I can't go any farther. Why not? There we go. Winlink, pretty much everybody knows about it now. It was originally started as a messaging system, originally for boaters. Started with the automatic link establishment radios, those pricey frequency agile commercial radios. And it's since expanded to packet radio, PAC-TOR, VARA HF, and on VHF, AX.25. And I didn't know you could send messages via APRS, but who knew? Also, VARA FM. VARA is a software modem that's available for both for HF and FM. It's inexpensive, performs very well. It compares very favorably to PAC-TOR on HF and beats the pants off of packet radio on VHF and UHF. But on AREDN, it beats the pants off of all of them. And let's just leave it at that. But the nice part about there's no digipeating required. The network knows how to get to the post office. And if you didn't already know, it's got a large set of messaging templates that are actively maintained. We see updates to those templates once or twice a month, I'd say. And this is the Winlink Express is the email client for a Winlink. It looks like regular email, but depending on whether you're going to send it via PAC-TOR or VHF, FM, or AREDN HF or whatever, the configuration is different. So it can be a little complicated to understand. The other messaging is email, plain old email servers configured for the mesh network, which honestly is about, I don't know, half a dozen config lines. And you can use any email client for it. I use Thunderbird. And additionally, we threw up a Roundcube web-based email access for it. And the nice thing about it compared to Winlink, there's no attachment size restriction. I mean, there's a practical limit, obviously, but Winlink has to limit attachment sizes because they don't know if you're going to send it via HF or not. And obviously, if you tried to send even a small picture via VARA HF, you'd be there for days. But you can do it with standard email on an AREDN network. And we've got it configured to where you send a mail to w6bi.k6pvr-mail@meshmail.org. It will come into my Winlink. We grabbed meshmail.org. If somebody else wanted to use that, we could make it ventura.meshmail.org, and you could make it, I don't know, tennessee.meshmail.org if you wanted something like that. We could accommodate that. It's very nice. And here's the Thunderbird, again, an eye chart. But up at the top left, you can see my Gmail. And down at the bottom is my inbox for Meshmail. And here's a screenshot of the Roundcube webmail. So got you two choices. This is easier. Other things you can put on the network. This is my weather system. Really doesn't matter what kind of weather instrument or station you have. This software is called WeWX, or maybe WeWeather, I don't know, WEEWX. It's open source, it's free, runs on a number of different operating systems, and supports hundreds of different weather stations and instruments, oddball instruments. I grabbed this one and refreshed it because if you look down at the gust speed in the middle, you'll notice that during the Palisades fire, Pacific Palisades fire a week or so ago, we hit 60 miles an hour for a gust. So that was pretty impressive. Fortunately, we didn't have any fire here. Dave, AI6VX has a homebrew seismometer out in Ventura, and I talked him into posting it on the mesh network as well as on his home server. So it's interesting to go see when we hear a jiggle, feel a jiggle out here to go looking at his. And it's not all about MCOM. We've spun up a Scrabble server and played a few games. This is BZ Flag. It's a tank game, and it runs very well with moderate network speeds. They've coded it very nicely. And sometimes after the weekly nets, we'll play a few hands of poker. So let's talk about the hardware. Um, it's designed for outdoor use, obviously, with a couple of notable exceptions, which I'll talk about. Um, weatherproof, PoE, power over Ethernet, so you only have to run one cable. And there's two software-defined transceivers in each one. That's for MIMO, multiple input, multiple output. You may not be aware that 802.11n and later versions can send and receive multiple simultaneous data streams on the same channel. The way they do it for MIMO, you have a vertically polarized signal and a horizontally polarized signal on the same channel, sent out by the transceivers and received by the transceivers at the other end and combined in one data stream. It's pretty amazing. You ever want to get a headache, go look at the entry for 802.11n on Wikipedia. Just skim it, but it makes for interesting reading. Most models have built-in gain antennas too, obviously. And we're recommending that if you're going to buy something new, buy one of the 802.11 AC devices, not one of the legacy 802.11n. If you've got one of the older pieces of gear, you go ahead and deploy it. Just don't buy any new ones. And yeah, this stuff is just substantially better. There's a little one, Microtech SXT-SQ. It's about, I don't know, it's not even 8 inches square. It gives you 16 dBi gain, and we said 10 to 12 miles. And by the way, you don't get a mass clamp with it, which is really annoying. If you're going to point it horizontally, you can strap it to a pole with a hose clamp, but otherwise get the cheapie on the left or the better one on the right. Last time I looked, the cheapie on the left, cheapie hose clamp thing there was $3 or something like that. Need a little more gain. There's a Ubiquiti nano beam on the left, 19 dBi gain on the right. The light beam, 23 dBi. Last time I looked, the nano beam was about 110 and the light beam was about 80. Why would the one with lower gain be more expensive? Because it has dual gigabit Ethernet ports. So if you have need for something like that, that's what you want to use. But I really like the light beam on the right. 75, 80 bucks. Just really performs well. And if you really need to reach out and smack someone, you get the power beam on the left or the Microtech dishes on the right. I think they're about 125, depending on the size. The guys who deploy are integrating AREDN with their Go boxes or making dedicated digital Go boxes like the Microtechs because they're lighter and they have less wind loading. And if you're an HOA, you take a Microtech light dish feed and put it at the feed point of an old satellite dish. Your neighbors will probably never notice that it's not pointing at a synchronous satellite. So in the shack, you need something to integrate the AREDN network with your home network, and the Microtech HAPs are what do the trick. They can direct traffic from your computer out to the network over port 1 or internet port 1 or out over the mesh network port 5. This is what I'm recommending now. We used to recommend the HAP AC Lite, but it's getting quite long in the tooth in terms of horsepower. This has 4 CPUs, 4 cores, the usual 2 internal radios, which can be configured for as a mesh node. I don't know why you'd want to do that, or an access, a Part 15 access point, or a Part 15 access client for use in your house. Um, and the previous versions never had external antennas, so this is a big improvement there. I think they're down to about $100. That's my that's my network access. It's a nano beam at about 30 feet. Um, There's another one. This is I forget his call sign in the San Fernando Valley. He has a good shot at our node on Verdugo Peak, but he has a friend farther to the east in the shadow of Verdugo Peak. So he picks up the signal um, from Verdugo Peak in one of those, and you can see underneath the little nano station on the top, it has 2 network ports. So the Ethernet comes up into one port, comes back out the other port to the second node. It forwards PoE power and data, so you can handle 2 nodes on one Ethernet cable. No need to run 2 cables up there. That's pretty slick. Um, a lot of the gear I've just shown you, like you wouldn't run a Baofeng in an operational repeater on a Hilltop, you wouldn't run those uh, examples I showed you on a Hilltop. This is what you would use. This is called a sector antenna. This happens to be a ubiquity sector antenna. Um, they call it a sector antenna because it covers 120 degrees, a sector of the uh, compass rose. Inside that antenna is a 120-degree gain antenna that's horizontally polarized and another one that's vertically polarized. And they come out through those 2 SMA jumpers on the back of the antenna and go into the top of the radio. In this case, it's a ubiquity rocket. It doesn't come with antennas. And this is an example of how you would configure them. Um, this is in Chatsworth Peak, and Marty knows that we lost this site a couple years ago, but it's a good example of what you would do. The stuff on the left, on top of the container is county stuff. We're not interested in that. But on the tower, we've the large dish was our backbone link looking west. And the various sector antennas, there's one for part 15, there's a 5 gigahertz, a 2.4 gigahertz, and there was a 3 gigahertz there. So gives you an idea what can be done. So those of you in Southern California may be familiar with DARN, the Disaster Area Repeater Network. This is their DARN 4? DARN 4? DARN 24. Anyway, it's on top of Verdugo Peak. Looks a little bit like something out of Star Wars. But in any case, a lot of that stuff is theirs and not ours. They have 2 microwave links on the telephone pole pointing to a couple mountaintops to the east. We have 3 sector antennas there, 5 gigs pointing south, 5 gigs pointing west, and 2 gigs pointing west. We also have 3.4 gig over the hills down to West LA to Culver City. The big dish you can see closest to you is our 10 gig link that until just recently linked us to South Mountain 40 miles away. The 70 plus mile per hour winds up there last week not only killed the power and destroyed Edison's telephone poles, that aluminum bracket holding the 10 gig radio and dish snapped, and Mike K6MJU found them about 100 feet farther to the west. Going to need some work. This is obviously not a ham site. This is a commercial site on Pleasants Peak. It's in Orange County, southeast of Southern California, southeast of LA County. And the owner is ham friendly, and one of the early AREDN developers lived in that area. So he had a chance to deploy some gear up there. The stuff in the yellow is all AREDN related. Not shown below the picture are dishes pointing in 3 or 4 different points of the compass. So this is a major backbone site. So what's a supernode? It's a node with special configuration. The problem with mesh is, well, it's not a problem because we've dealt with it, but as your island becomes more and more populated, you have more and more nodes to deal with. It causes a few issues, but the developer came up with this idea to link islands together. Um, he said primarily so they can learn what kind of services other people use, but I think it was an excuse to put something cool in. So anyway, the nice thing about it is um, you can get to all of those nodes, but it doesn't add to your node count. In other words, there are, I don't know, well, I'll talk about it in a second. So um, if you're interested, you can get to it at worldmap.ardenmesh.org, and I've got a screenshot of it. You can zoom in anywhere. The nodes are color coded, and you can click on them and just show those nodes. You can click on a node icon to get its vital data. There is it used to be a text list. Now I think it's JSON. Anyway, some more information you want to know from that node, and all of it's pulled down into the database. And if you click on it, a node on the map, the database will show what the hardware is, what version of software is, how long it's been up, the links it's got, ad nauseum. And if you see a link, you hover on it and tells you where it's going, where it's coming, and how good it is. So this is a screenshot of the Supernode map. These are only showing the supernodes. There's 56 or something of them. But here's all of them. And obviously, those are not RF links. They are internet tunnels. And, internet tunnels are not ham radio, but then neither is DMR. As ham radio operators, we're communicators, and we use whatever works. I do tell people in my presentations, if you're going to offer services to emergency responders via the AREDN network, make sure you have RF hops from one point to the other. Don't depend on the internet. That's what they need to remember. You don't use internet tunnels for emergency services, because if the internet's up, your emergency responders don't need us. So here's a few shots. This is Yakima, Washington. Chad KA7HAK has done a good job of pushing it out. You can't see it real clearly, but the orange 5 gigahertz nodes are on Hilltops, and he's pushed hand tilt zoom cameras out there, and he's caught a number of brush fires and monitored them that way. Here's Oregon. They've done a real good job. A lot of RF links locally. San Francisco, they had nothing going in 2019. I gave a presentation at Pacificon up there and got mobbed in the hallway out. And subsequent to that, they either got or bought a large number of surplus nodes, configured them, and handed them out willy-nilly with no network planning. So it was chaos. Since then, in the last couple of years, they've gotten a lot more regimented. There are backbones from here to there. They've created cells, so they're moving along pretty well. This is Southern California. Because we had a couple developers in this area, we kind of got a head start. I think I did a count. There's about 400 nodes showed on this map, and that's Hilltop and ground level, end user. Where do you get the info? ardenmesh.org. List of supported products. And by the way, there are about a couple dozen supported products that are marked sunsetted. AREDN takes software from OpenWRT, which is a Linux-based product for access points and stuff like that. And we put our special sauce in it and throw away stuff we don't need. As their software moves on, the oldest products don't work well anymore. They have limited flash, limited RAM, relatively slow CPUs, and they put it on a sunset list. We do the same thing. Doesn't mean they won't be supported anymore, but at some point they won't be able to accept new software updates. So pay attention to that if you're browsing that list. You can get software downloads. You can install them there, production release, and there's nightly builds. They're called nightly, but they only become available the day after somebody submits a patch. There's how-tos, FAQs. Come on. There's a Facebook group, about 3,200 members, AREDN community on Slack, other social media, lots of mailing lists. Last time I looked, I'm on 14 AREDN mailing lists on groups.io. I've got some specialized stuff on orbsplace.net. I have a beginner's guide PDF. You can download it and give it to any of your ham friends who might be vaguely interested. I need to freshen it, but there's a PDF version of a similar presentation. It's got all the verbiage in it that I've been spewing during this presentation. And there's a how-to on how to use the AREDN network of Winlink. There's a configuration you need to set up in Winlink. It's not hard. It's, I don't know, half a dozen steps. And there's some other useful links, line of sight calculators, stuff like that. Any questions? If not, we're done.
Orb, thank you very much. Let me fix this. Unhighlight you so we can see everybody. Okay, Bill has his hands up in Washington. Go ahead.
Yeah, good presentation. Enjoyed it. We've been dabbling with AREDN down here in just south of Olympia on I-5. And one thing I noticed that, oh, your hilltops are bald. You know, trees are an issue for us.
Yeah, I was going to point that out.
Also, hilltops are expensive for us. Like our local repeater, I had to take a repeater off a hill because the company that owned it wanted $1,300 a year for it, and that wasn't in my budget. But
that's
so
cheap compared
where
to
do you
some
get
of
the
ours.
money? You got a sugar daddy somewhere? Because I don't. I was. But anyway, my question is the commercial email server that you're running. What software are you running for that?
Oh, I knew. I don't run it. It's just one of the open source products. It's not
Not
SendMail.
Exchange. It's not
Huh?
Exchange or something
Oh,
like that.
absolutely not. It's an SMTP server. Um, I'm sorry. Drop me a note and I'll refresh my memory.
Okay, thanks.
And you were
Very
talking
good.
about Hilltops. We partnered with a couple local agencies, and by virtue of providing them with access, they've let us onto their sites for nothing, honestly. A commercial site, we're on there because we provide sweat equity. We've taken stuff off his tower for free. We've done weed trimming twice a year, and in exchange, he lets us have, well, it used to be zero, but now he's asking for a little bit of money. So there's ways to do it.
So the unit that you're putting up on these, it's basically just on the mast. There's nothing down in the equipment room, right?
Well, yes and no. If you are going to put up, say, two sector antennas pointing in different directions for different user populations, two different towns going that way,
Right.
you you don't use an omni. That's a no-no. You put two different sector antennas pointing there on two different channels. You bring the Ethernet cable down, and it goes into a VLAN aware switch, network switch, network switch, and it brings the traffic down from one and back up to the other one.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good. Or I have a question. You mentioned providing services to government agencies. And do you, for their traffic, do you move to UNII channels rather than amateur channels for that traffic, so as to avoid the commercial use problem?
Well, yeah, that is a problem. The whole encryption thing. See, it's not illegal to put the
No, I'm
internet.
just talking about using amateur frequencies for commercial operation, which is actually prohibited.
What kind of commercial operation?
Well, a government is not a licensed, you can't have a government agency as a licensed amateur.
Well, we're not putting their we're passing their traffic
Yeah,
on their behalf. They're not, it's like if a non-ham is going to press a microphone and talk, we've got somebody monitoring, right?
right.
Well, if somebody hands me a thumb drive and wants me to transmit a text, that's legit.
Okay, as long as it's not, if it's, like public safety related and not business related.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, no,
That's what I'm getting to. I mean, are you monitoring so that they're not, like sending their payroll over your network?
well, we have a very limited deployment, and so far that's kind of theoretical.
Okay.
It's just
Yeah.
we've got budget for 6 or 8 hospitals, and just it's like molasses trying to get anything done.
Oh, tell me. Yeah, we have, our auxiliary communication service here in LA, as you well know, has our own mesh network we set up mainly to provide for notification from the city's fire department to the residents of a certain canyon that often don't have any cell coverage or other coverage. So everything is 5 gig, most of it's 5 gig backbone, and then 2 gig down the hills. And then we switch, for the user part, the user interface is regular UNII channels. So they are, and it's receive only for them. So they can get the, information about evacuation or whatever, but they can't, they can't connect it to the internet. They can't, send their own
Right,
messages and traffic over it.
right. That's Mandeville Canyon?
Yep.
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 I had
Which,
those discussions with Hank. Yeah.
yes,
I'm glad
yes.
I'm glad they've got it working.
Yeah. And yeah. Okay. Let's see. Dan, WL7COO, hand up.
Yeah, Marty, in part to address your question. So, shares accommodates government entities as to whether they want to have their own encryption. And if they do, then the transport encryption is a whole second wrapping. And with AREDN, no one ever convinced me that you couldn't take traffic from a government agency that they had encrypted and pass it on to another agency that it's intended for and violate Part 97. Because we as Part 97 don't obfuscate it. You can search Part 97 and you'll never see the word encryption. What we're forbidden to do is obfuscate traffic. And if we just pass it on behalf of government agencies, we're not the ones that are obfuscating it. But that argument's going to live longer than I am.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Probably.
Yep.
So,
Okay,
okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Bill had another question.
Well, it sounded like you drop a telephone, IP phone at your served agencies. Is that only operational when you have a ham present for the third person traffic, or how are you handling that?
We have not considered that because again, it's theoretical. We've tested them. They're in place, but we've not had here's the deal. And I like your spin on this, Marty. Could a civilian pick up a VoIP phone and call another VoIP phone on a ham network legally? Because that data is not encrypted.
It's basically third-party traffic. This is almost similar to if you let somebody use the old auto patch system on somebody's repeater. You as long as somebody is monitoring it sufficiently to see that they are not going outside the allowable uses under Part 97, then you should be okay. Now we have we have mesh phones at each of our key locations on our ACS network, but they're really only used for ourselves. And since we're all licensed, that's not an issue. We're not supplanting commercial telephone systems.
Yeah, I suspect in an emergency where our EOCs are manned, we have hams up there, they would call the extension, hand the phone to whoever wanted to talk, and we'd sit there and monitor them.
And just like we'd hand a microphone on our mobile radio
Exactly.
to them to go through a repeater. Again,
Yeah.
there's an amateur actively monitoring what's going on. And generally speaking, if it's that dire, it's emergency traffic, it's not routine. I mean, a government can have commercial traffic, and that's not what we want to do. So as long as we know what's being passed, then I think we're good.
So, or doesn't AREDN still have a call sign that is issued in free text every 5th packet or something, or every 5 minutes, to get around the issue of third-party traffic? There's always a call sign associated responsible for the origin of that traffic.
Well, it's standard 802.11 packet traffic, and you could decode it with TCP dump, and it's actually transmitted 5 times a second.
5 times a second?
Yeah, it's the OLSR broadcast. Yeah.
All right. So that's
so you're meeting your ID requirements in spades.
Oh yeah. Well, that's coincidental, or just incidental. There's routing information.
How's Andre doing? Is he still involved, or is he?
No, he's
not Andre at all.
He still attends the calls occasionally, but honestly, I don't think he's doing well. He's paraplegic now. He had some sort of disease attack his spine a couple years ago, and he's in and out of the hospital.
Well, give him my best if you think of it and can.
Yeah, same.
I will.
Thanks.
And that's after losing his wife a few years ago. So
yes.
And about AREDN and the internet, I think you're aware that for 5 years I had a 24-hour test station on our bedroom deck that was communicating with the gateway down in the valley, another AREDN node that had a gateway. And so all I had to do was send my Winlink traffic via Telnet, and I'd kill 3 stones with one message. Just by getting all that logged and proven. And for a while we had a phone system up here, and it disintegrated because nobody could agree on what kind of music we wanted while they were on hold.
It's pretty funny.
No, I didn't think it was funny. I thought it was sad. But
well, you guys got any other questions? We don't have to hold this. You've got my email address. You got questions. I'm available via email or pretty much every social
Barry,
media.
I didn't see any unanswered questions in chat. Did you have any?
You underemphasized the Supernodes and that URL that anybody who has internet can look at. Because if anybody takes the time to look at it, they're going to get absorbed and going, ooh, look at this, look at that.
Let me check with Barry here real quickly. Dan, Barry, any unanswered questions in chat?
We're good.
Okay,
Dave's waving his hand.
I have an N station M2, and when I look at the hardware support, it says the XW is stable, but the XM is sunsetted, and I can't tell which this is.
Can you hold the label up to the camera close enough? Let me hang. Wow. I think that's an XM.
Really? I can't. I mean, what it says on there is it says the model number is WX.
Oh, that's an XW, believe it or not. The only difference between the two is The older XMs only have 32 megs of RAM, and the newer ones have 64.
64 gigs, yeah. Or
But the 32 megas are supported with a, they call it a tiny image. It's a subset, but it'll work fine for now.
okay.
Just don't go real far with it.
Very good.
Well, yeah, we're in Ann Arbor, which is the tree city of America.
Yeah, just down the street with it.
Yeah. And on the San Bernardino Microwave Society, we call those green attenuators.
Yeah. So, and we don't really have much in the way of mountains in Michigan either. So we're having to be dependent on getting access to tall buildings in the area.
Make friends
Find
with
the
your
tallest
repeater
tree and
owners.
cut a few branches off the top.
Like the Trinity Hospital tower, that kind of thing. And so from my I've got a 40-foot tower tied to the end of the house here, and from the top of that tower I can see downtown Ann Arbor. And we did have a big 70-foot tree out in the yard, but it split down the middle, so we got rid of it. So as far as I can tell, I think I've got a clear shot to.
And you told your wife it was an accident, right?
Yeah, right. To the tower downtown. So maybe I can actually get something up and working. We've been doing some experimentation here with AREDN, and some people have got nodes up, but for the most part, they've not been able to connect to each other because of all the trees and all the junk in the way.
What's
So,
the distance between you and downtown?
probably less than 5 miles.
That nano station would work okay for testing, but if you wanted good throughput, get something with a dish.
With a dish, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you really want a stump crunch SNR to do some good throughput.
I've also got an old bullet over here. That was just something we were experimenting with about 2 or 3 years ago, just to.
E-waste.
Yeah, we what we did was we all got together in a conference room and everybody zapped their bullets and we all got them to talk to each other there. So at least
Yeah,
that
they will.
got it started, right?
Yes.
So.
The only deal with the things that have an N connector on them, they're not MIMO, and a non-MIMO and a MIMO, they don't mix well. It's kind of like water and oil.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
At least I have 2 nodes here in the basement and I can make them talk to each other.
There you go.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions before we wrap up? We're getting toward the witching hour here. I don't see any. So, Orv, thank you again. And we appreciate this always, especially updated information and not showing us the slides with all the text on them.
Yeah, I'll try not to. Pretty pictures always draw a crowd.
Was a good call on your part.
Well, we'll do it again in a year. How's that?
All right, very good. Anytime. Thank you, everybody, and stay well, and we'll talk to you next week.